The Galactic Preservation Institute had 17 major problems. 16 were solved by voracious cubs that devoured containment budgets and security systems. The last one, that fell to Jake Murphy, a human intern with zero useful life experience. Every advanced species had failed spectacularly using their greatest strengths against these apex predators. But Jake had a different idea, one that started with a simple cardboard box. Picture the Galactic Preservation Institute, this massive facility orbiting a blue giant star, designed to contain the universe's most dangerous creatures. Their biggest headaches came from 6 Vorak cubs, the last survivors of a supernova that vaporized their home system. These weren't your typical predators. They had retractable plasma claws that could slice through starship hulls and telepathic abilities strong enough to give panic attacks to an entire observation deck. Each cub had systematically dismantled 16 different containment systems, chewing through force fields, short-circuiting AI wardens, and turning advanced security tech into expensive confetti. The Institute's budget reports looked like disaster relief requests. You had energy barriers that could stop a frigate, shredded like paper, molecular bonds designed to withstand supernovas, picked apart like cheap locks. Director Klex, a Zephyrian with feathers that turned gray under stress, faced daily updates about new breaches. The Galactic Council was losing patience, sending increasingly tense memos about interstellar security concerns. Every species they'd consulted had brought their absolute best and failed spectacularly. The containment wing looked like a museum of expensive failures. Then Klex made a call that stunned everyone. He brought in Jake Murphy, the human intern. Jake had a degree in xenobiology and exactly zero experience with apex predators. The Institute staff watched this young human, who barely knew how to operate the coffee synthesizer, stroll into their most secure briefing room. You could feel the skepticism. Here were beings who'd mastered quantum containment, anti-telepathy shielding, plasma-resistant alloys, and their solution was a species that still used cardboard for moving houses. The contrast wasn't just stark, it was almost insulting. But Klex saw something others missed. While experts focused on stronger walls and smarter systems, the cubs weren't actually trying to escape. They were tearing things apart systematically, almost methodically. They'd breach containment, then linger near the exits instead of fleeing. They'd disable security systems, then nap in the control rooms. The problem wasn't containment. It was engagement. These super-intelligent predators, barely 6 months old, were utterly bored. They'd been raised in sterile environments with nothing to interact with except things they could destroy. Their entire existence was like being trapped in a white room with only expensive things to break. So when Jake stepped forward with his idea, the room went quiet. Not because it was brilliant, but because it sounded insane. He wasn't proposing stronger shields or better locks. He suggested playing with them, treating galaxy-ending predators like mischievous kittens. The staff expected proposals involving neutronium reinforcement or psychic damping fields. Instead, they got a human intern talking about engagement and stimulation, about treating apex predators not as threats to be contained, but as intelligent beings with needs beyond basic survival. Klex, against all conventional wisdom, gave the green light. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe he saw something in Jake's approach that resonated with his centuries of experience. Or maybe he'd just run out of other options. The stage was set for the most unlikely solution in galactic history, one that would redefine how advanced civilizations interact with dangerous species. Not through superior force, but through understanding what they actually needed. So the crystalline collective stepped up first. Picture 12 shimmering beings made of interlocking geometric shapes, floating in perfect synchronization. They communicated through light patterns that represented complex mathematical theorems. Their civilization had solved entropy, mapped alternate dimensions, and could calculate the exact moment any star would collapse. They approached the Vorak cubs like a particularly interesting math problem. They didn't bring weapons or barriers. Instead, they presented the cubs with elaborate puzzle boxes made of energy-resistant crystal, each one requiring sophisticated pattern recognition to solve. The puzzles were beautiful things, glowing with internal logic, designed to stimulate intellectual curiosity. The collective's theory was simple: engage their minds and their destructive impulses would fade. The cubs examined the first puzzle for approximately 3 seconds. Then the largest one bit the central crystal component in half. The others followed suit, crunching through the intricate latticework like it was brittle candy. The collective's representatives actually flickered in confusion, their equivalent of a stunned pause. But the real trouble started when the cubs didn't just eat the puzzles. They used the sharp, fragmented edges to start working on the containment field's control panel. See, the crystals were specifically designed to interact with energy fields, which made them perfect improvised tools for manipulating force field emitters. Within minutes, the cubs had jury-rigged the crystal shards into lockpicks that could interface with the security system. The collective watched their greatest intellectual achievements become burglary tools. They tried presenting more complex puzzles, faster changing patterns, even metaphysical conundrums that had taken centuries to formulate. The cubs treated it all the same way. Crunch, crunch, poke at the locks. You could see the pattern emerging. The collective's entire approach was based on meeting intelligence with greater intelligence. But the cubs didn't operate on logic. They operated on instinct layered with frightening cleverness. They weren't trying to solve puzzles. They were testing what things could be eaten or used as tools. The failure cost the Institute $17 million, credits in damaged equipment, and required a complete overhaul of the containment field's control systems. The collective's representatives left quietly, their light patterns dimmed in what observers interpreted as profound embarrassment. Their post-incident report simply stated, "Subjects demonstrated non-linear problem-solving approaches incompatible with conventional logic systems." This became the template for every subsequent failure. Species after species would come in with their particular strength, only to watch it get turned against them. The Vorak cubs didn't beat them at their own game. They changed the game into something entirely different. What the experts missed was that you can't reason with pure predatory instinct. The cubs weren't malfunctioning machines that needed debugging. They were living creatures with drives and needs that didn't align with academic challenges. Their thought processes operated on a wavelength that valued practicality over abstraction, utility over beauty. So when the crystalline collective retreated, the Institute called in the exact opposite approach. They brought in the Xenar Masters, beings of pure energy who believed all consciousness could be harmonized through spiritual connection. If logic failed, perhaps enlightenment would succeed. The pattern was set. Each species would project their own values onto the cubs, only to discover that apex predators don't care about your philosophy. They care about what works, and what worked, apparently, was whatever got them closer to something interesting to chew on or take apart. You almost felt bad for the experts. They kept bringing symphony orchestras to a demolition derby. After logic failed spectacularly, the Institute turned to spirituality. The Xenar Masters arrived, 12 beings of shimmering energy that floated rather than walked. They communicated through harmonic resonances that could calm racing heartbeats across entire star systems. Their approach was the opposite of the crystalline collective. Instead of challenging the cubs' intellect, they would soothe their spirits. The Xenar entered the containment chamber and began their meditation protocol. They emitted waves of tranquil energy designed to pacify even the most aggressive predators. The observation deck monitors showed serotonin and cortisol levels across species, except the Vorak cubs, whose biochemistry didn't register on any known scale. The cubs watched the shimmering energy forms with predatory focus. Then the largest one pounced, not aggressively but curiously. It batted at a Xenar Master like a cat chasing a laser pointer, the energy being flickered in what might have been surprise. Another cub joined in, trying to catch the shimmering form between its paws. This was when the Xenar made their critical error. Sensing the cubs' engagement, they intensified their emotional projection. They beamed waves of peace, harmony, and spiritual enlightenment directly into the predators' minds. The observation team initially thought it was working. The cubs had stopped dismantling equipment and were focused on the Xenar. Then the bio readings shifted. The cubs' metabolic rates spiked, not with aggression, but with what appeared to be pleasure. The Xenar Masters suddenly flickered erratically. Their harmonic resonances turned discordant. A junior science officer finally realized what was happening. The cubs were feeding on the emotional energy. Vorak predators don't just consume physical matter. They metabolize strong emotions, particularly fear and anxiety. The Xenar, in their attempt to project calm, were actually broadcasting an all-you-can-eat buffet. Their serene energy patterns were being converted directly into nutritional intake for the cubs. The Masters tried to withdraw, but their energy forms had become entangled with the cubs' telepathic fields. It was like trying to pull away from a vacuum seal. The cubs, now thoroughly enjoying themselves, began playing with the Xenar like toys, batting them around, chasing their flickering forms, and generally treating enlightened beings as interactive entertainment. Several Xenar required emergency reconstitution after the incident. Their post-encounter reports described spiritual fragmentation and existential disorientation. One master reportedly needed 3 standard months of resonant therapy to regain coherent form. The cubs, meanwhile, appeared more content than ever, napping peacefully after their emotional feast. You could see the pattern hardening. Each species brought their supreme achievement, logic, spirituality, technology, and watched it become either food or toys. The Vorak cubs didn't respond to any conventional approach because they operated on entirely different priorities. They weren't malicious. They were just being themselves. And themselves happened to treat advanced civilization's greatest achievements as interesting snacks or entertainment. The Institute's staff began to realize they weren't dealing with containment breaches. They were dealing with bored children who happened to be able to dismantle security systems with their teeth. The problem wasn't stopping them from escaping. It was giving them something better to do than escape. After the Xenar incident, the only remaining option was the simplest and most direct: brute force. If you can't outthink them or calm them, maybe you can just build something strong enough to hold them. So they called in the Iron Brigade, the galaxy's foremost experts on impenetrable containment systems. Their solution would be physical, not intellectual or spiritual. Walls within walls, fields within fields. Nothing subtle, nothing clever. Just pure, uncompromising strength. The stage was set for what everyone assumed would be the final solution. Either the brigade would succeed where others failed, or the Institute would have to admit defeat and release the cubs into some uninhabited system. Nobody considered the possibility that the cubs might not want to escape at all. They might just want better accommodations. The Iron Brigade arrived with the subtlety of a meteor impact. Their engineers wore powered armor that clanked on the polished floors, carrying schematics for what they proudly called the universe's first truly escape-proof enclosure. They'd contained pulsar eruptions and contained singularity events. 6 predator cubs, they treated it like a straightforward engineering challenge. Their design was breathtaking in its uncompromising simplicity. They built a nested series of containment fields powered by a miniature star they'd brought in a magnetic bottle. The inner walls were made of collapsed matter. Atoms pressed so tightly together they formed a surface harder than neutronium. The energy barriers could deflect capital ship weapons. The environmental controls could maintain perfect stability through supernovas. It was less a cage and more a portable fortress designed to withstand the end of the universe. They finished construction in record time, presenting Director Klex with a control console the size of a small vehicle. The lead engineer declared with absolute certainty that nothing could breach their system. The Vorak cubs would be safe, comfortable, and completely contained. The observation deck filled with officials from a dozen species, all ready to witness the triumph of pure engineering over predatory cleverness. The cubs were transferred into the new enclosure. They didn't panic or struggle. They just examined everything. For exactly 12 minutes and 17 seconds, they moved quietly around the perimeter, sniffing at the energy barriers, tapping the collapsed matter walls with their claws, studying the field emitters with unnerving focus. Then the largest cub found a seam between 2 field generators. It didn't try to break through. It inserted a single claw and twisted. The field flickered. Another cub joined, working on the environmental control interface. They moved with precise coordination, like a surgical team disassembling a complex device. Within minutes, they disabled the primary containment field, but they didn't escape. They started rearranging the components. The collapsed matter walls designed to resist supernovas became climbing surfaces. The energy field emitters became perches. They used the magnetic containment bottle's conduits as slides and tunnels. The Iron Brigade's engineers watched through the observation window, their expressions shifting from confidence to confusion to outright horror. Their impregnable fortress was becoming an adventure playground. The cubs weren't trying to get out, they were renovating. One cub managed to recalibrate the environmental controls to create gentle thermal currents they could ride like aerial surfers. Another reprogrammed the security monitors to display interactive games. The miniature star's containment field became a ball they could bounce between them using telekinetic pulses. The lead engineer kept repeating, "That's not physically possible," into his comm unit. His team's greatest achievement, the culmination of centuries of defensive technology, was being treated like an expensive toy set. The Cubs weren't defeating their security. They were playing with it. The pattern was undeniable now. Every species had brought their supreme strength to the problem: logic, spirituality, engineering. And each time, the Cubs had treated these achievements not as challenges to overcome, but as entertainment to engage with. They didn't want to defeat advanced technology. They wanted to play with it. Maximum security, it turned out, provided maximum entertainment value when you were an apex predator cub with nothing better to do. The more complex the system, the more interesting it was to take apart and repurpose. Director Klex received the damage report later that day. The Iron Brigade system had cost more than the Institute's annual budget. The Cubs had converted it into what appeared to be an elaborate jungle gym with bonus thermal surfing capabilities. The engineers requested permission to attempt a more robust design, but Klex declined. The Institute was out of funds, out of options, and rapidly running out of patience. That's when he remembered the human intern who'd been quietly observing all these failures, the one who kept mentioning that the Cubs seemed bored rather than malicious, the one whose species still used cardboard boxes for storage and moving household goods. It seemed absurd, but then again, so did watching trillion-credit security systems become playground equipment. Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the right one. Sometimes you need to step back and consider what you're actually trying to achieve. The Cubs didn't need better containment. They needed better entertainment. So why did Jake Murphy succeed where hyper-intelligent crystals and energy beings failed? He had exactly one qualification: a degree in xenobiology. No field experience, no advanced training, just textbook knowledge and what humans call common sense. When Director Klex introduced him as their new solution, the Institute staff reacted like he'd announced they were switching to prayer as their primary containment strategy. You had scientists who'd pioneered quantum locking technology, engineers who built Dyson spheres, telepaths who could calm supernovas, and their new hope was a human who still thought synthetic coffee was a treat. The skepticism wasn't just palpable, it was practically vibrating through the observation deck's reinforced glass. But Jake possessed something none of the experts had: fresh eyes. While everyone focused on what the Cubs were doing, chewing through systems, escaping containment, he noticed what they weren't doing. They weren't trying to actually leave. They'd breach security, then linger near the exits. They'd disable cameras, then nap in front of them. They were like teenagers testing boundaries, not prisoners planning escapes. He spent days just watching the footage others had analyzed to death. Not the security breaches or the technical failures, the downtime, the moments between destruction. He noticed how the Cubs would systematically disassemble equipment, then arrange the components in patterns. How they'd communicate with what sounded like frustration when their environment remained unchanged. How they'd almost sigh when another identical meal pellet dispensed. These were 6-month-old predators raised in sterile containment. Their entire existence consisted of white walls, automated feeders, and things they weren't supposed to touch. They had plasma claws that could slice through starship hulls and telepathic abilities that could short-circuit computers, but nothing interesting to cut or communicate with. Their environment was the equivalent of putting a genius child in an empty room with only a textbook on tax law. Jake saw what experts missed because he wasn't looking. Through the lens of advanced technology or cosmic spirituality, he saw them as what they were: bored kids. Intelligent, powerful, destructive kids, but kids nonetheless. Where others saw security threats, he saw creatures starved for stimulation. His human perspective came from a species that still builds blanket forts and plays with cardboard boxes. Humans understand that sometimes the most advanced solution is the wrong solution. That sometimes you don't need stronger walls. You need better toys. The breakthrough came when he reviewed the Iron Brigade's footage. Everyone saw the Cubs dismantling a trillion-credit security system. Jake saw them playing with it. They weren't trying to escape, they were building something, rearranging components into structures, creating slides from energy conduits and perches from field emitters. They weren't defeating the system, they were improving it to their specifications. That's when he approached Klex with his theory. The Cubs didn't need better containment. They needed engagement. They needed something to do that wasn't destructive. They needed play. The director listened, feathers twitching in what might have been amusement or despair. After all the advanced solutions had failed, the simplest approach remained untried. Jake's proposal sounded like madness. Play with creatures that could shred battle armor. Engage telepathic predators that fed on emotional energy. But the pattern was undeniable. Every time the cubs received interesting stimulus, their destructive behavior decreased. When the Xenar Masters provided emotional energy, they fed rather than destroyed. When the Iron Brigade provided complex systems, they built rather than escaped. Sometimes inexperience reveals what expertise obscures. When you're too close to a problem, too invested in your particular solution, you miss the obvious. Jake saw the cubs not as problems to be solved, but as beings to be understood. His lack of advanced experience became his advantage. He didn't know what was supposed to be impossible. So he proposed stepping into the containment chamber with no weapons, no shields, no advanced technology. Just a different approach. One that started with observation and ended with engagement. One that treated apex predators not as threats but as intelligent creatures with needs beyond survival. The most dangerous experiment in the Institute's history was about to begin, and its primary tool was going to be perspective. Jake stood before the Institute's senior staff, a room full of beings who'd dedicated centuries to containment science. He looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. Director Klex's feathers ruffled slightly as he processed the proposal. "You want to play with the galaxy's most dangerous predators," he stated, the incredulity thick enough to slice. The translation systems buzzed as various species murmured in their native tongues, a symphony of disbelief. A heated, multilingual argument erupted. The head of security argued that Jake's plan violated 17 different safety protocols. The head of finance pointed out that human interns weren't covered by their catastrophic incident insurance. The Xenar representative flickered with distress, recalling how their energy forms had become chew toys. But Jake held his ground. He didn't argue for better technology or stronger barriers. He requested permission to simply observe the cubs firsthand, to understand them before trying to control them. When pressed for specifics, he revealed his primary containment device. A single corrugated cardboard box. Manufactured on Earth, he'd brought it from home. The room fell silent, then erupted in laughter that echoed through the chamber. You had beings who'd engineered Dyson spheres and contained singularities. And their new solution was a container used for storing sweaters. The contrast wasn't just amusing. It felt like a cosmic joke. Jake didn't flinch. He explained that the box was rated for 20 kilograms, had excellent structural integrity for its weight, and featured a removable lid. He'd even brought a toilet paper tube to use as a periscope. The security chief demanded to know what made him think flimsy Earth packaging could contain predators that ate neutronium for breakfast. Jake's response was simple. He wasn't trying to contain them. He was trying to engage them. He pointed out that every previous attempt had failed because they were trying to impose control. The cubs responded to force with greater force, to complexity with dismantling, to spirituality with consumption. But nobody had tried simply giving them something interesting that wasn't meant to restrain them. The box wasn't a prison, it was a toy, a stimulus, an invitation. The room's mood shifted from outright dismissal to wary curiosity. Director Klex observed that Jake's approach was the exact opposite of everything they'd tried. Where others built fortresses, he brought a box. Where others used advanced technology, he used household materials. Where others sought to dominate, he sought to play. It was either genius or the most expensive suicide in galactic history. Jake signed the waiver forms with a flourish, adding death by cardboard as the cause of incident on his official record. The dark humor wasn't lost on the staff. Here was a species that could joke about its own potential demise while facing down apex predators. It was either admirable courage or alarming recklessness. The decision hinged on one simple fact. Everything else had failed. Trillion credit systems lay in ruins. Advanced species had retreated in confusion. The Institute's reputation was crashing faster than a misaligned wormhole. What did they have to lose? Director Klex approved the experiment, overriding the safety protocols with a temporary waiver. The staff watched Jake prepare to enter the containment chamber, their expressions a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Sometimes the simplest solution hides in plain sight. obscured by layers of complexity and expertise. When you're accustomed to building starship-grade containment fields, you forget that some problems respond better to a different approach. The room held its breath as the airlock cycled, ready to witness either a breakthrough or a disaster. The universal truth remained: play requires no permission, only participation. And sometimes a cardboard box is all the invitation you need. Jake stepped into the containment chamber carrying his cardboard box like it was the most natural thing in the universe. The Vorak cubs immediately shifted into their standard predatory stance, claws extended, telepathic projections flooding the chamber with what the monitors labeled as homicidal intent. Their glowing eyes tracked his movement, bodies coiled to spring. Then they saw the box. The change was instantaneous. Their aggressive postures relaxed. The telepathic noise that had haunted the observation deck for months, that constant stream of destructive impulses, went completely silent. The monitors showed cognitive activity shifting from combat readiness to something the systems couldn't classify. The cubs weren't preparing to attack. They were looking, studying. One cub took a step forward, then another, moving with cautious curiosity rather than predatory advance. It sniffed the air near the box, head tilted in a gesture that translated across species as genuine interest. The others followed, their attention fixed on this strange brown corrugated object. For the first time since their arrival, they weren't trying to escape or destroy something. They were investigating. From the observation deck, someone whispered through the comm system, "Is he talking to the box?" Jake was indeed speaking, not to the cubs, but about the box. He commented on its structural integrity, demonstrated the removable lid, and praised its excellent storage capacity. He treated it like the most interesting object in the chamber, which apparently made it exactly that. The cubs approached cautiously, their movements careful rather than aggressive. They sniffed at the cardboard, tapped it with their claws, peered inside through the opening. Their telepathic emissions shifted from aggression to what the analysts later described as focused curiosity patterns. They weren't trying to determine if it was edible or dangerous. They were trying to understand what it was for. Jake placed the box on the floor and stepped back. The largest cub moved closer, then actually put its head inside the opening. The observation deck held its collective breath. This was the moment when previous encounters turned violent, when the cubs would typically shred whatever object they were investigating. Instead, the cub made a soft chuffing sound and withdrew its head, looking at Jake as if expecting something. Jake produced a toilet paper tube from his pocket and attached it to the box as a periscope. The cubs watched this modification with intense focus. Another cub approached and actually touched the tube with its nose, then looked at Jake again. The dynamic had completely shifted. They weren't viewing him as a threat or a resource. They were viewing him as someone who introduced interesting things. For the first time, the predators weren't trying to escape their containment or destroy their environment. They were engaged, curious, interested. The change was so dramatic that the security team actually checked their sensors for malfunctions. The cubs were demonstrating behavior that shouldn't have been possible for their species in containment, playful investigation, rather than destructive testing. This marked the beginning of an entirely new relationship dynamic. The cubs stopped viewing their environment as something to defeat and started viewing it as something to explore. Their telepathic projections shifted from destructive impulses to what sounded like questions. The observation team realized they were witnessing something unprecedented: apex predators choosing curiosity over aggression when presented with genuine novelty. The cardboard box hadn't contained them. It had engaged them. It provided something their sterile environment had never offered. Something interesting that wasn't designed to restrain or control them. They responded not as prisoners to a new form of confinement, but as intelligent beings to a new form of stimulation. The equation had flipped. Play didn't lead to trust. Play was trust, manifested through shared engagement with something novel and non-threatening. Jake's cardboard box wasn't just a container. It was an architectural project. He'd cut openings for tunnels, reinforced the corners with extra tape, and added a second level with a removable roof. The toilet paper tube periscope was just the beginning. He'd even drawn fake control panels on the sides with a marker. To the Institute staff, it looked like a child's arts and crafts project. To the cubs, it was the most interesting thing they'd ever seen. The observers held their breath. They expected plasma claws to slice through the flimsy material within seconds. They'd seen these predators dismantle neutronium alloys and energy fields. Cardboard should have been confetti. But the cubs didn't attack. They approached slowly, sniffing the edges, tapping the walls with careful precision. Then the largest one did something nobody predicted. It crawled inside. The box became a fortress, a personal space. The cubs took turns occupying it, peering through the periscope like tiny submarine captains. They rearranged the modular components, stacking sections to create towers, connecting tunnels to form passages. Their telepathic chatter shifted completely. The constant stream of destructive impulses, what the monitors labeled death thoughts, vanished. In its place came something new, playful exchanges, curiosity patterns, what sounded like debate over structural improvements. For the first time, the cubs appeared comfortable. They weren't pacing the perimeter or testing the containment fields. They were fully engaged with the cardboard environment. One cub would guard the entrance while another explored the interior. They'd take naps inside the box, something they'd never done in their sterile containment chamber. The transformation was so complete that security teams double-checked their biometric readers. Jake's simple approach had achieved what advanced technology couldn't. He hadn't contained the cubs, he'd given them a reason to want to stay. The constant attempts to breach security stopped. The destructive testing of equipment ceased. The cubs were too busy building, exploring, and playing. Their energy was redirected from escape to engagement. The box became more than containment. It became a home. The cubs treated it with care, maintaining the structure, repairing minor damage with careful precision. They'd even developed what appeared to be ownership rituals, with specific cubs claiming certain sections as their personal space. The sterile white chamber was transforming into a lived-in environment. The Institute staff watched in stunned silence. They'd seen species with godlike abilities fail against these predators. They'd watched trillion credit systems become entertainment. Now they were witnessing apex predators treating cardboard like priceless real estate. The shift wasn't just behavioral, it was cognitive. The cubs were demonstrating problem-solving skills, cooperation, and even what looked like creativity. Director Klex kept muttering "how" under his breath. The security chief actually smiled, something nobody had seen in months. The transformation was so complete, so unexpected that it felt like watching magic. The most dangerous creatures in the Institute's care were now fully occupied with what amounted to recycled packaging material. The lesson was undeniable. You don't always need stronger walls or smarter systems. Sometimes you need better toys. The cubs weren't malicious, they were bored. Give them something interesting to do, and their destructive energy transforms into constructive engagement. The box provided stimulation, challenge, and novelty. Everything their previous environment had lacked. What started as a simple experiment became a revelation. The cubs weren't just playing, they were thriving. Their biometrics showed reduced stress levels, improved sleep patterns, and even what looked like contentment. The cardboard fortress had become the center of their world, a symbol of how simple solutions sometimes solve complex problems. The impossible had happened, and it started with a box, some tape, and a different way of seeing things. The single cardboard box multiplied. It became a modular city rising from the sterile floor of the containment chamber. The cubs started connecting boxes with tunnel systems, stacking them into towers, creating bridges from reinforced cardboard strips. What began as simple play evolved into complex engineering projects. They weren't just playing with the boxes anymore. They were building with purpose. Their telepathic communication shifted from playful chatter to what sounded like architectural debates. Observers recorded intense discussions about structural integrity, optimal tunnel angles, and load-bearing capacities. The cubs would pause their construction to examine each other's work, offering what appeared to be suggestions and corrections. They'd sometimes dismantle entire sections and rebuild them with improvements. The transformation was staggering. These same creatures that had shredded neutronium alloys and consumed emotional energy were now carefully measuring cardboard segments. Their plasma claws, capable of slicing through starship hulls, were being used to precision-cut ventilation holes. Their telepathic abilities, once weaponized to disable security systems, were now coordinating construction teams. The scene completely reversed itself. Where once stood predators testing containment boundaries, now stood architects debating zoning regulations. The kill or be killed mentality gave way to build and collaborate. They developed specialized roles. Some focused on structural engineering, others on interior design, a few on quality control. They even created a rotating system for project leadership. Jake watched from the observation deck with quiet satisfaction. His simple approach had unlocked something nobody anticipated. The Cubs weren't just occupied, they were fulfilled. Their destructive energy found constructive outlets. The need to dismantle became the desire to build. The impulse to escape transformed into the desire to improve their environment. Director Klex began to understand the underlying truth. Predatory energy wasn't something to suppress or contain, it was something to redirect. The Cubs possessed immense physical and mental capabilities that needed expression. Previous attempts had treated these abilities as problems to solve, rather than potentials to harness. The cardboard provided a channel for their natural drives. The Cubs developed what looked like municipal governance. They held daily meetings to discuss new projects and maintenance schedules. They created designated areas for sleeping, playing, and what appeared to be council sessions. Their cardboard city became a functioning micro-society with rules and responsibilities. The Institute staff witnessed behaviors never before documented in VORAC, species cooperation, planning, civic engagement. The Cubs that once represented pure destructive potential were demonstrating advanced social organization. They weren't just building structures, they were building community. Jake's approach proved that engagement trumped containment. By providing simple materials and opportunities for creative expression, he'd transformed prisoners into participants. The Cubs weren't trying to escape their environment anymore. They were invested in improving it. Their entire focus shifted from defeating systems to building systems. The cardboard city expanded daily. New sections appeared with increasingly sophisticated designs. The Cubs incorporated discarded components from previous failed containment systems, repurposing energy conduits as lighting and control panels as decorative elements. They treated their environment not as a cage but as a canvas. This shift from destruction to construction revealed a fundamental truth about intelligent predators. Their energy and intelligence need constructive outlets. Without them, they'll create their own entertainment, which usually involves taking things apart. With proper engagement, that same energy builds rather than destroys. The Cubs became so invested in their projects that security protocols were gradually relaxed. Observation teams noticed they'd actually protect their structures from damage, carefully repairing any wear and tear. They'd become custodians of their environment rather than its destroyers. What started as an experiment in containment became a lesson in engagement. The Vorak Cubs demonstrated that even the most dangerous beings respond to opportunities for meaningful activity. Their transformation proved that play isn't just diversion, it's essential cognitive and social development. The Institute's approach to dangerous species underwent a fundamental shift. Instead of asking how to contain them, they began asking how to engage them. The cardboard city stood as proof that participation beats imprisonment every time. The Cubs weren't just safer, they were happier, more fulfilled, and actually thriving in an environment designed around their needs rather than their restrictions. Word of Jake's cardboard solution spread through galactic channels faster than a quantum comm burst. The Crystalline Collective, whose mathematical theorems could predict stellar evolution, offered their entire knowledge database for a single cardboard box. Their transmission cited unprecedented interest in terrestrial material science applications. They'd spent millennia building the galaxy's greatest repository of knowledge, and they were trading it for shipping containers. The Xenar Masters arrived next, their energy forms flickering with what might have been excitement. They wanted to study what they called transcendent simplicity, the idea that profound solutions could emerge from basic materials. Their spiritual practices involved complex meditation rituals that took centuries to master. Yet here was a species achieving similar results with compressed paper pulp. They set up observation fields around the containment chamber, studying the box like it held the secrets of the universe. The Iron Brigade's engineers returned, but not with new containment designs. They requested specifications for Earth-style engagement containers and manufacturing rights for corrugated cellulose materials. Their military precision was now focused on box assembly lines instead of force field generators. They even developed a quality control system for evaluating cardboard structural integrity and play potential. Jake found himself conducting workshops in the Institute's main conference room. He taught representatives from 17 species the principles of if it fits, I sits containment physics. He demonstrated proper tape application techniques, optimal box sizing for different predator classes, and the strategic use of supplementary string. Civilizations that had mastered interstellar travel and energy weapons were taking notes on how to fold cardboard. The conference room transformed into a showroom, displaying various box configurations. There were tunnel systems, multi-level forts, and even decorative variations. Security teams that once monitored predator threats were now evaluating play potential and engagement metrics. The shift from control to participation became the new standard across galactic containment facilities. Entertainment and presence began replacing brute force in behavior management protocols. Zoos across multiple systems started implementing Earth-style enrichment programs. Research facilities developed new metrics for measuring play engagement rather than containment durability. The approach spread beyond predator species to include all manner of dangerous wildlife. Jake's title officially changed to Director of Interspecies Relations and Advanced Box Technology. His office became the center of what staff jokingly called the Cardboard Consortium. He managed requests from zoos, research facilities, and even private pet owners across 17 star systems. Each consultation package included a standard cardboard box, a length of string, and simple instructions emphasizing engagement over restraint. The enterprise grew into a legitimate interstellar business. Manufacturing facilities on agricultural worlds began producing specialized cardboard for different species requirements. Some boxes featured scent enhancements. Others had reinforced edges for heavier predators, and some even included biodegradable blinking lights for visual stimulation. The core principle remained unchanged across all applications. Creatures wanted to feel like they mattered. They needed engagement, stimulation, and opportunities for self-expression. The cardboard provided a medium for that expression, a simple, flexible material that invited interaction rather than resisting it. What started as an intern's crazy idea became standard protocol. Galactic containment guidelines were rewritten to prioritize environmental enrichment over security measures. The shift saved countless credits in damaged equipment and containment breaches. More importantly, it resulted in happier, healthier animals across countless systems. The revolution wasn't about the cardboard itself. It was about the philosophy behind it, treating dangerous creatures as participants rather than prisoners, providing stimulation rather than restraint, recognizing that sometimes the most advanced solution is recognizing that advanced solutions aren't always necessary. Jake's simple approach demonstrated that across species boundaries, intelligent beings respond better to engagement than to control. The cardboard box became a symbol of that understanding, a humble object that changed how the galaxy interacted with its most dangerous inhabitants. Sometimes progress doesn't mean building better walls. It means building better relationships. And sometimes that starts with something as simple as a box. The Institute's quarterly reports told the story in numbers sharper than any plasma claw. You had charts showing productivity increases that looked like mountain peaks, 400% growth in zoo operations, a figure that made the finance department actually cheer for once. Containment breaches dropped by 97%, turning what was once a daily crisis into a historical footnote. The metrics didn't just improve. They fundamentally changed how the Institute measured success. Customer satisfaction ratings approached theoretical maximums across 17 species. Beings who'd previously filed complaints about security risks now sent compliments about educational value. The shift wasn't just statistical, it was cultural. Visitors who once viewed the Vorak cubs as existential threats now saw them as ambassadors of interspecies cooperation. The predators had become teachers demonstrating a new way to coexist. This data signaled a broader transformation across galactic ecosystems. Zoos and research facilities began adopting playful containment protocols. The approach spread to forestry services, agricultural monitoring, even urban wildlife management. Systems that had relied on force fields and shock barriers started implementing enrichment programs. The philosophy shifted from control to engagement, from restriction to participation. The Vorak cubs themselves became living proof that predators could be integrated rather than isolated. They weren't caged by fear anymore. They were cared for, entertained, and actively involved in their environment. Their transformation from destructive forces to constructive participants changed how the galaxy viewed dangerous species. They became case studies in redirection rather than restraint. The cardboard metropolis stood as a physical symbol of this coexistence. What began as a simple box evolved into a complex habitat that visitors could actually observe and study. The Cubs' architectural projects demonstrated problem-solving skills, cooperation, and creativity. Their city wasn't just containment, it was a functioning community that happened to be made of recycled materials. Containment became a shared project rather than a war of wits. Staff and Cubs collaborated on new additions to the cardboard city. Maintenance teams provided materials while the Cubs handled design and construction. The relationship shifted from adversarial to cooperative. Everyone worked toward the same goal, creating an environment where intelligent predators could thrive. The numbers provided undeniable proof that attention worked where force failed. Energy consumption for security systems dropped dramatically. Maintenance costs fell to negligible levels. Staff morale improved so significantly that the Institute actually had to create new job satisfaction metrics. The data showed that treating creatures with respect and providing engagement wasn't just ethically sound, it was operationally superior. Jake's approach demonstrated that the Cubs, like any living beings, needed attention, entertainment, and belonging. Their previous destructive behavior stemmed from boredom and lack of engagement. By addressing these needs with simple materials and opportunities for self-expression, he'd unlocked their potential rather than suppressing it. The metrics proved that understanding beats overpowering every time. The Institute's success became a model for other facilities facing similar challenges. Shadow Leviathan preserves adopted cardboard enrichment programs. Quantum Swarm containment units implemented play-based protocols. Even civilian pet owners began using the techniques for domestic predator species. The philosophy spread because the results were undeniable. Creatures responded better to engagement than to control. Financial reports showed the cardboard approach cost less than 0.1% of previous containment budgets. The savings allowed the Institute to expand its conservation programs and research initiatives. They could protect more species, study more ecosystems, and advance galactic knowledge because they weren't spending everything on repairing damage from frustrated predators. The final metric that convinced everyone was the Cubs' own biometric data. Stress indicators dropped to normal levels. Cognitive development charts showed accelerated learning patterns. Social bonding measurements indicated stronger community connections. The numbers proved what the observers could see with their own eyes. Engaged predators are healthier, happier, and far less destructive than confined ones. This data-driven transformation reshaped galactic policy on dangerous species management. Regulations were rewritten to prioritize environmental enrichment over security measures. Funding shifted from bigger barriers to better toys. The approach saved credits, improved outcomes, and created better lives for countless creatures across star systems. Sometimes the most advanced solution is recognizing that simple engagement works better than complex containment. The cardboard metropolis didn't just house the Cubs, it governed them. What began as a simple tunneling system evolved into a full-fledged municipal government, right there in the containment chamber. You had zoning regulations for different box districts, public works projects for maintaining tunnel integrity, and even a rotating council system for making collective decisions. The Cubs who once shredded security systems now debated infrastructure budgets. They constructed towers that reached the chamber's ceiling, connected by elaborate bridge systems made from reinforced cardboard strips. Different sections specialized in specific functions: residential zones with sleeping areas, commercial districts with trading posts, entertainment sectors with game spaces. The Cubs developed a sophisticated barter system using leftover materials and food portions as currency. Their telepathic communications shifted from playful banter to policy discussions. The teenage predators began hosting diplomatic receptions for Institute staff and visiting researchers. They'd give formal tours of their municipal building, pointing out architectural features and explaining their governance system. Their cultural celebrations became regular events on the Institute's calendar, featuring ceremonial box-stacking rituals and synchronized telepathic performances. Visitors who once feared these creatures now received formal invitations to tea parties inside the cardboard towers. Their reality show, Keeping Up with the Vorth, became an unexpected hit across 17 star systems. The Cubs installed miniature cameras throughout their city, broadcasting their daily lives and governance decisions. Viewers tuned in to watch zoning disputes, construction projects, and even their version of council meetings. The show's popularity transformed the Cubs from dangerous predators into interstellar celebrities with fan clubs and merchandise lines. The transition from entertainment to legitimate social structure happened so gradually that nobody noticed until it was complete. The Cubs weren't playing government, they were governing. Their decisions affected daily life in the cardboard city. They established rules, settled disputes, and managed resources with surprising effectiveness. What started as imaginative play became functional self-organization. This represented the ultimate validation of Jake's approach. Engagement hadn't just stopped their destructive behavior, it had unlocked their capacity for self-governance. The Cubs demonstrated that when given proper stimulation and opportunities for expression, even apex predators could develop complex social structures. They weren't contained anymore. They were autonomous beings managing their own environment. The Institute's role shifted from warden to supporting neighbor. Staff provided materials and technical assistance when requested, but the Cubs handled all planning and execution themselves. Their self-sufficiency became so complete that security protocols were largely discontinued. The predators that once required maximum containment now managed their own affairs with minimal supervision. The galaxy watched this transformation with fascination. Scientific journals published studies on the Vorax's unexpected political development. Sociologists analyzed their governance models. Urban planners studied their cardboard architecture. The Cubs became case studies in how intelligent beings organize themselves when given freedom and resources rather than restraints. Their municipal government developed sophisticated systems for conflict resolution, resource allocation, and public works management. They established committees for environmental quality, entertainment programming, and interspecies relations. The Cubs, who once represented pure destructive potential, were now drafting policy documents and holding regular elections. This evolution proved that playful containment could lead to genuine autonomy. The Cubs weren't just occupying space, they were building a society. Their transformation demonstrated that engagement doesn't just prevent bad behavior, it enables good behavior to emerge naturally. When treated as responsible beings rather than dangerous animals, they acted responsibly. The cardboard metropolis stood as a living example of how to turn prisoners into partners. The Cubs' self-governance saved the Institute enormous resources while providing valuable insights into predator behavior. Their success became the model for managing other dangerous species across the galaxy. Sometimes the best containment is no containment at all, just provide the right environment and let nature take its course. The Vorak Cubs' journey from destructive predators to self-governing citizens showed that even the most dangerous beings respond positively to trust and opportunity. Their cardboard city proved that when you treat creatures with respect and provide engaging stimulation, they'll often surpass your expectations. The galaxy learned that sometimes the most secure containment is achieved not by building better cages, but by building better communities. The Void Devourers arrived without warning, entities of pure destructive force that existed outside normal space-time. They consumed everything indiscriminately, causing reality itself to unravel around them. This was Code Black Protocol, the kind of threat that normally triggered full militarized escalation across the galaxy. Defense fleets scrambled, evacuation orders flooded communication networks, and panic spread through 17 civilizations. These weren't predators to be contained, they were existential forces to be survived. Jake watched the incoming reports with calm curiosity, while seasoned admirals argued about quantum warheads and temporal barriers. He saw the same pattern repeating itself. Military strategists projected their strengths onto beings that operated on entirely different principles. The Void Devourers didn't respond to force because they were force embodied. They consumed reality not from malice, but from what appeared to be instinctual hunger. While defense planners calculated casualty estimates, Jake prepared a different approach. He gathered snacks from the Institute's commissary and selected several premium cardboard boxes from the supply closet. His colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. You don't offer cheese crackers to entities that consume solar systems. But Jake understood that sometimes the most radical solution looks like ordinary hospitality. He approached the containment zone where the Void Devourers were being studied. The observation deck was packed with military officials and scientists monitoring the unstoppable consumption. Reality flickered around the entities like bad reception. Jake stepped through the airlock carrying his simple offerings while admirals muttered about acceptable losses. "Hey there, I brought snacks," he announced to the swirling masses of destructive energy. The entities paused their consumption, not because they were fooled or defeated, but because they'd never been greeted this way before. Every previous encounter involved weapons fire or desperate attempts to contain them. Nobody had ever offered them food and conversation. The sensation that followed felt like the universe itself was curious. The Void Devourers' relentless consumption slowed, then stopped entirely. They examined the cardboard boxes with what might have been interest. Jake explained the boxes' potential, demonstrating how they could be transformed into various structures. He offered the snacks not as bribes, but as gestures of welcome. What happened next defied all predictions. Instead of consuming the offerings or attacking Jake, the entities began interacting with the materials. They didn't understand snacks or cardboard, but they understood the concept of gifts. They understood invitation. Their destructive energy shifted, transforming from consumption to creation. They started working with the cardboard, not to destroy it, but to reshape it. Their reality warping abilities, once used only for consumption, became tools for construction. They created interdimensional sculptures that existed in multiple spaces simultaneously. What began as snacks and boxes evolved into collaborative art projects spanning several realities. The military officials watched in stunned silence as the galaxy's ultimate threat became the galaxy's most innovative artists. The Void Devourers discovered that unraveling reality could be creative rather than destructive. They could express themselves through dimensional manipulation instead of mere consumption. Their hunger transformed into artistic practice. This marked the final evolution of Jake's approach. The containment mindset shifted completely from defensive to creative. Instead of trying to stop dangerous forces, the Institute learned to redirect them. Even the universe's most destructive beings responded to playfulness and invitation when approached with genuine curiosity rather than fear. The Void Devourers established the galaxy's first interdimensional art collective within 6 months. They continued working with cardboard and other simple materials, creating sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their reality-consuming abilities became tools for artistic expression rather than destruction. They'd found something more satisfying than consumption: creation. This ultimate test proved that no being is purely destructive when offered alternatives. The Void Devourers responded to snacks and cardboard not because they were simple, but because they represented a different way of being. They'd been consuming realities because nobody had ever shown them they could create instead. Their transformation demonstrated that even existential threats might just be misunderstood artists waiting for the right invitation. Jake's philosophy wasn't complicated. It didn't involve technical manuals or classified defense protocols. He treated dangerous creatures the way humans treat family, with attention, care, and the understanding that everyone needs to feel like they matter. This simple idea became the foundation for a new galactic standard in interspecies relations. The secret wasn't stronger containment or smarter technology. It was recognizing that even apex predators respond to being treated like someone who belongs. This perspective transformed containment from a problem of control into an opportunity for connection. The Vorak cubs weren't prisoners to be managed, they were teenagers to be understood. Their plasma claws and telepathic abilities didn't make them monsters. They made them family members with particular needs and talents. By addressing those needs with simple engagement rather than complex restraints, Jake unlocked their potential rather than suppressing it. The cubs matured within their cardboard city, evolving from destructive forces into adolescent leaders. They developed governance systems, hosted diplomatic events, and even managed their own public works projects. Their transformation demonstrated that dangerous creatures don't need stronger cages. They need stronger relationships. The Institute's role shifted from warden to supportive neighbor, providing materials and assistance while the cubs managed their own affairs. Director Klex's career advanced dramatically as he became the Galactic Council's primary advisor on this new approach. His reports emphasized that humble, imaginative methods consistently outperformed fear-driven domination. Civilizations that had relied on overwhelming force began adopting relationship-based models. The shift saved resources, improved outcomes, and created more harmonious interactions across species boundaries. The philosophy culminated in a simple truth that resonated across cultures. Family members make the house a home. This wasn't about blood relations or species compatibility. It was about creating environments where beings feel valued, engaged, and understood. The cardboard boxes weren't containment devices, they were invitations to belong. They provided structure without restraint, engagement without force, and community without conditions. Containment became about care rather than control. Facilities across the galaxy redesigned their approaches to prioritize environmental enrichment over security measures. Staff received training in interspecies communication and behavioral engagement. The focus shifted from preventing escape to fostering participation. Dangerous creatures weren't problems to solve, they were partners to understand. The galaxy learned to host apex predators as family members. This didn't mean ignoring their dangerous capabilities. It meant recognizing that those capabilities could be redirected toward constructive purposes. The Vorak Cub's plasma claws became precision tools for architectural projects. Their telepathic abilities facilitated complex social organization. Their predatory energy fueled creative expression rather than destruction. This approach required a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of asking how to make creatures less dangerous, staff learned to ask how to make them more engaged. Instead of building stronger barriers, they provided better toys. Instead of minimizing contact, they maximized meaningful interaction. The results spoke for themselves: happier creatures, safer facilities, and more productive research. Jake's philosophy demonstrated that even the most dangerous beings respond to genuine care and attention. Their transformation proved that understanding beats overpowering, engagement trumps restraint, and relationship building outperforms fear-based control. The cardboard city stood as physical proof that sometimes the most advanced solution is recognizing that advanced solutions aren't always necessary. The galaxy's approach to dangerous species underwent a permanent change. Regulations were rewritten, training programs were updated, and success metrics were redefined. Facilities that once measured security in terms of containment breaches now measured it in terms of creature contentment. The shift wasn't just procedural, it was philosophical, reflecting a new understanding that the best way to manage risk is through mutual respect and thoughtful engagement. Jake's tabby cat Whiskers never set paw in the containment facility, yet became the story's quiet moral center. While scientists debated quantum containment fields and diplomats drafted interspecies protocols, the cat slept on Jake's apartment couch, utterly unconcerned with galactic affairs. Yet this ordinary Earth animal held the key to understanding beings that consumed realities. Whiskers represented the simple truth that even independent predators crave attention and care. The cat would shred furniture when bored, demand food at inconvenient hours, and occasionally bring gifts of questionable origin to the doorstep. These weren't acts of malice. They were demands for engagement from a creature that needed to feel seen and valued. Jake recognized the same patterns in the Vorak cubs. Their destructive behavior wasn't fundamentally different from a house cat knocking. Valuables off shelves both were cries for stimulation. This understanding became the foundation for interspecies diplomacy. Where advanced civilizations saw threats to neutralize, Jake saw creatures to understand. His famous line, "I have a cat," wasn't a joke. It was a philosophical statement about recognizing shared needs across species boundaries. The galaxy, once terrified of apex predators, began learning coexistence through curiosity rather than containment. Humanity's ultimate contribution wasn't superior technology or military strength. It was empathy and play. While other species built stronger cages, humans asked what the creatures inside those cages actually wanted. The Vorak cubs, now interstellar ambassadors, demonstrated that even the most dangerous beings respond to genuine engagement. Their transformation from destructive forces to constructive partners proved that understanding trumps overpowering. The cardboard metropolis stood as physical proof that cross-species coexistence could be built. Through shared creative projects, the cubs weren't just contained, they were collaborating. They hosted cultural exchanges, participated in research programs, and even advised other facilities on predator management. Their dangerous capabilities became assets rather than liabilities when properly channeled. Whiskers remained oblivious to interstellar diplomacy, of course. The cat continued napping, eating, and occasionally attacking stray dust bunnies with lethal precision. But this ordinary domestic animal had inspired a galactic shift in perspective. The lesson wasn't that all predators are harmless. It was that even dangerous creatures respond better to respect than to fear. The galaxy learned that sometimes the most advanced solution requires no technology at all. A box, a string, and willingness to play could achieve what trillion-credit security systems could not. This approach spread beyond predator management to general interspecies relations. Diplomats began incorporating play sessions into treaty negotiations. Scientists included enrichment activities in research protocols. The philosophy of engagement replaced the doctrine of control. Jake's simple statement, "I have a cat," became shorthand for this new approach across star systems. It represented the idea that understanding creatures requires seeing them as individuals with needs and desires, not just as problems to solve. The Vorak cub's successful integration proved that even beings with plasma claws and telepathic abilities could become valuable community members when treated with respect. The cardboard, playgrounds, and string-based games that spread through galactic facilities weren't just entertainment. They were diplomatic tools, scientific instruments, and social bridges. They demonstrated that play isn't frivolous. It's essential communication across species boundaries. The universe discovered that sometimes the most profound connections begin with something as simple as a shared game. This transformation didn't eliminate danger or differences. It simply acknowledged that even dangerous beings respond to genuine engagement. The Vorak cubs still had plasma claws. They still possessed terrifying abilities. But they channeled those capabilities into construction rather than destruction, creation rather than consumption. They became partners rather than prisoners. The legacy of Jake's cat-inspired philosophy extended far beyond containment facilities. It influenced educational systems, diplomatic protocols, and even urban planning across multiple civilizations. The idea that understanding beats overpowering became standard practice. Creatures once considered existential threats became valued community members. Sometimes the universe doesn't need sharper claws or stronger shields. It needs better toys and more creative playmates. The galactic shift from fear to curiosity, from containment to engagement, proved that even the most dangerous situations respond to simple human empathy. And sometimes that empathy begins with understanding something as simple as a house cat's demand for attention. Jake's consulting business became an interstellar enterprise, practically overnight. He wasn't selling advanced technology or complex systems, just cardboard boxes, balls of string, and simple toys packaged with instructions that essentially said, "Play with it properly." These humble kits moved across 17 star systems at 10,000 credits apiece, not because the materials were valuable, but because the philosophy worked. Zoos, research facilities, and even private pet owners adopted Earth-style engagement methods. What began as desperation had become standard practice. The cube of misfit containment model gained legitimacy far beyond the Vorak cubs. Facilities dealing with interdimensional threats started implementing cardboard-based enrichment programs. The approach proved effective across species boundaries because it addressed universal needs rather than specific behaviors. Where military solutions failed and technological answers fell short, simple engagement succeeded. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most advanced civilizations need the simplest solutions. Earth-style behavioral modification therapy entered official diplomatic discourse. Training programs focused on understanding creature needs rather than controlling creature actions. The shift wasn't just procedural, it was philosophical. Instead of asking how to make beings less dangerous, staff learned to ask how to make them more engaged. This transformed interactions across countless facilities and species. Even supposedly impossible cases responded to the new approach. Shadow leviathans, interdimensional predators that fed on fear, were given soft blankets and taught weaving techniques. They started producing intricate textile art instead of consuming realities. The quantum swarm organized itself into a structured chess club, its countless particles moving in coordinated patterns across dimensional boards. These weren't containments. They were redirections of capability toward constructive ends. Dr. Tentrix and other veteran observers marveled at the Vorak cubs' continued development. They weren't merely contained, they were thriving. The adolescent predators had become interspecies ambassadors, hosting diplomatic functions and cultural events within their cardboard metropolis. Their transformation from security threats to community leaders demonstrated the power of engagement over restraint. The numbers proved it. Higher satisfaction ratings, lower costs, better outcomes across all metrics. The public dimension of the cardboard revolution expanded across media platforms. The Cubs' reality show Keeping Up with the Vorth became unexpectedly popular, turning them into interstellar celebrities. Their municipal governance and architectural projects fascinated viewers across species. The show transformed public perception of dangerous creatures from things to fear into beings to understand. Educational programs incorporated footage of the Cubs' activities into lessons about conflict resolution and creative problem-solving. Jake gradually yielded leadership of the movement he'd started. The philosophy had spread beyond any single individual or species. New experts emerged specializing in interspecies play therapy and environmental enrichment design. The approaches diversified while maintaining the core principle. Engagement beats containment every time. Jake's role shifted from innovator to consultant, then eventually to historical figure as the methods became standard practice. The galaxy learned that advanced civilizations don't always need complex solutions. Sometimes they need to step back and recognize that understanding trumps overpowering. The cardboard boxes weren't magical. They were simple tools that facilitated connection. Their success demonstrated that even the most dangerous situations respond better to curiosity than to force. Attention, consent, and mutual interest became the new standards for resolving interspecies tension. Facilities measured success not by security breaches prevented, but by engagement levels achieved. The shift saved resources, improved outcomes, and created more harmonious relationships across species boundaries. What started with one human intern and a cardboard box had transformed galactic approaches to coexistence. The legacy wasn't about the materials themselves. It was about the perspective they represented, treating dangerous creatures as partners rather than prisoners, providing stimulation rather than restraint, recognizing that even apex predators respond to genuine engagement. The cardboard revolution proved that sometimes the most secure containment comes not from building better cages, but from building better relationships through shared creative projects and mutual understanding. The universe's toughest problems rarely need the sharpest blade or strongest shield. Sometimes they just need a box, a bit of string, and someone willing to play. Jake's cardboard solution proved that empathy and simplicity often outmatch complexity and force. When faced with impossible challenges, it's worth asking what's being overlooked in the pursuit of control. Maybe the answer isn't more strength, but more understanding. What simple, overlooked solution could change how you approach your own impossible problems? Sometimes the universe doesn't need a hero. It needs someone to play with.